Welcome to Farming Aid.
For years, the beef industry treated the Angus decision like a settled debate. Black hide meant quality, premiums, and market confidence. But something interesting started happening on the ground. In hotter climates, tougher forage zones, and regions facing longer droughts and rising input costs, the Angus story did not always match real-world results. Open cows, heat stress, higher vet bills, and more management pressure forced producers to quietly question whether reputation had replaced practicality. That is where the Brangus conversation enters, not as a challenger to quality, but as a challenge to assumptions. This video is not about tearing down Angus or promoting Brangus as a miracle solution. It is about taking an honest look at why one breed became the default choice and whether that choice always makes sense today. We are going to break down performance, adaptability, economics, and long-term sustainability in a way that reflects what ranchers actually experience, not just what sale catalogs promise. So the real question is not which breed is better. The real question is whether the industry followed marketing instead of matching cattle to land. And once you see the Angus versus Brangus debate through that lens, the answers may surprise you. Angus cattle earned their reputation for good reasons. They marble well, finish predictably, and perform reliably in moderate climates with solid nutrition. In controlled systems, Angus shine. Feedlots love them. Packers reward them. Consumers recognize the name. Over time, this created a feedback loop where Angus genetics spread faster than almost any other beef breed in modern history. But widespread adoption can sometimes hide weaknesses, especially when production conditions change faster than breeding goals. As ranching expanded into harsher regions and climate volatility increased, cracks began to show. Heat stress, parasite pressure, drought, and forage inconsistency began challenging cattle that were bred primarily for carcass traits rather than environmental resilience. Many ranchers compensated with more inputs. More shade, more water infrastructure, more supplements, more health interventions. It worked, but at a cost that is often ignored in glossy breed comparisons. Brangus entered this conversation from a very different direction. Born from crossing Angus with Brahman, Brangus was never meant to win popularity contests. It was designed to solve problems. Heat tolerance, insect resistance, disease resilience, and longevity were not side benefits. They were the foundation. The Angus influence brought carcass quality and maternal traits, while the Brahman influence brought survival where conditions are unforgiving. This made Brangus less flashy but often more functional where the environment sets the rules. The reality check begins when you step away from the sale barn spotlight and look at the pasture over a 10 or 20-year timeline. Angus cows in hot and humid regions can produce excellent calves, but they often require tighter management. Rebreeding rates can suffer under heat stress. Body condition drops faster during drought. Parasite loads become a constant battle. None of this means Angus are bad cattle. It means they are specialized cattle that thrive best when their needs are met consistently. Brangus cows, on the other hand, often operate with a wider margin of error. They graze longer during heat, travel farther for water, and maintain body condition on rougher forage. Calves may not always top the charts for marbling, but they tend to hit acceptable carcass targets while costing less to get there. In commercial operations where efficiency matters more than perfection, this difference becomes hard to ignore. One of the most uncomfortable truths in the Angus versus Brangus debate is that many breeding decisions were shaped more by market pressure than by land reality. Ranchers followed premiums, not ecosystems. In areas where Angus fit well, this was a smart move. In areas where heat, humidity, and forage stress dominate, it often led to frustration disguised as tradition. Brangus producers quietly watched their herds hold together while others fought constant uphill battles. Consumer branding also played a powerful role. Angus became a marketing term as much as a genetic one. Restaurants, grocery stores, and advertising campaigns reinforced the idea that Angus equaled quality. Brangus never received that level of consumer storytelling. As a result, many producers avoided Brangus not because the cattle underperformed, but because they feared market resistance. Yet in practice, most commercial calves are sold by weight and health, not by breed name. When carcass data is examined honestly, the gap between Angus and well-managed Brangus is far smaller than many expect. Modern Brangus genetics have closed much of the marbling difference while retaining environmental advantages. Feed efficiency often favors Brangus in heat-stressed conditions. Longevity frequently tilts toward Brangus cows that stay productive longer with fewer interventions. Over time, these factors compound into real economic outcomes. There is also a social component to this debate that rarely gets discussed. Choosing Angus became the safe choice. It aligned with neighbors, lenders, buyers, and extension advice. Choosing Brangus sometimes felt like pushing against the current. That psychological pressure matters. Ranching is already risky, and few producers want to add social risk to financial risk. But innovation in agriculture has never come from playing it safe forever. The question of whether we chose wrong is not about declaring a winner. It is about asking whether the dominant narrative blinded us to context. Angus are not universally superior, and Brangus are not merely a regional alternative. They represent different philosophies of production. One prioritizes carcass optimization under managed conditions. The other prioritizes adaptability and efficiency under stress. Climate trends are forcing this conversation into the open. Heat waves last longer. Droughts cut deeper. Input costs rise faster than beef prices. In this environment, cattle that require fewer inputs to stay productive gain an advantage. This does not eliminate Angus from the future, but it does challenge the assumption that Angus should be the default choice everywhere. Brangus producers often talk about sleep. Not as a joke, but as a real benefit. Fewer midnight checks during heat waves. Fewer open cows at preg check. Fewer surprises when pasture quality drops. These are not traits that show up in sale catalogs, but they matter deeply to people living with the animals every day. Another overlooked factor is crossbreeding flexibility. Brangus genetics integrate well into commercial herds, improving hybrid vigor without completely sacrificing carcass quality. In many operations, Brangus-influenced cows paired with terminal sires produce calves that perform competitively while cows remain durable and efficient. This system's approach often outperforms single-breed loyalty over the long run. Angus dominance also created genetic bottlenecks in some regions. Heavy use of popular sires narrowed diversity and increased sensitivity to stress. Brangus populations, shaped by necessity, often maintain broader resilience. This genetic insurance becomes increasingly valuable as environmental uncertainty grows. It is important to acknowledge that some criticisms of Brangus are outdated. Early Brangus cattle sometimes struggled with consistency. Modern selection has dramatically improved uniformity, disposition, and carcass outcomes. Meanwhile, Angus cattle pushed into marginal environments have exposed limitations that were previously masked by ideal conditions. The real lesson here is not about Angus versus Brangus as breeds, but about matching genetics to reality rather than reputation. When producers choose cattle based on marketing alone, the land eventually pushes back. When they choose based on environment, economics, and long-term sustainability, results tend to improve even if the choice feels unconventional. So did we choose wrong? In some places, no. Angus remains a powerful, profitable option where climate and management support it. In other places, yes, or at least partially. The mistake was not choosing Angus. The mistake was assuming one breed could fit every system without consequence. Brangus represents the uncomfortable reminder that resilience often matters more than reputation. It challenges producers to look beyond premiums and ask harder questions about efficiency, longevity, and total cost of production. As the beef industry evolves, those questions are becoming unavoidable. The future likely belongs to balance rather than extremes. Angus genetics will continue to shape carcass quality. Brangus genetics will continue to anchor production in tough conditions. Producers who understand when and how to use each will be better positioned than those who follow trends without context. In the end, this reality check is not an indictment. It is an invitation. An invitation to rethink assumptions, respect environmental limits, and choose cattle that work for the land rather than against it. Because in ranching, the land always gets the final vote. When you strip away the branding, the premiums, and the long-held assumptions, the Angus versus Brangus debate becomes much simpler. It is not about loyalty to a breed name. It is about whether the cattle in your pasture are truly working for your land, your climate, and your bottom line. For some operations, Angus still checks every box. For others, the reality on the ground tells a very different story. What this conversation really exposes is how often the industry rewards what sells best rather than what survives best. Angus built its reputation in systems that support it well, and that success deserves respect. But as conditions grow tougher and margins tighter, efficiency, fertility, and resilience start to matter more than labels. That is where Brangus quietly proves its value, not by hype, but by holding together when pressure increases. The takeaway is not that we chose wrong everywhere. It is that choosing one answer for every operation was the mistake. The smartest producers are the ones willing to challenge tradition, read their environment honestly, and adapt before problems become expensive. Breeds are tools, not identities, and the right tool depends on the job and the land it has to work on. If this reality check made you rethink your own breeding decisions, let us know in the comments. Like the video if it brought value, subscribe for more real-world livestock conversations, and share your experience. Because the future of beef production will not be decided by marketing, but by what actually works in the pasture.